there's gonna be a hibachi grill next door?
Yeah,
Sushi and hibachi?
finally,
Uh,
something.
I
Well,
hope they
there
have
could be-
good
It
Good,
could be more than one corner, yeah.
ventilation. We had we're by my office in
So for
Colorado.
example, if you've got,
We had this Mongolian
you've got
barbecue,
two
and it was very
private lots.
popular, but oh my gosh, was it
As
smoky
residential
inside that
lots.
place.
and you combine them to be
It'll
one
come right
tax
over here,
ID number.
and then we'll
you'd
really
still
be
only
hungry
entitled
at
to
lunch.
four. However, if for whatever reason they weren't combined,
Yes,
then you'd probably be entitled to 8.
Right.
Yeah.
we don't have that much more on our,
We are getting a feed. I've got the video up here.
by my office in Colorado.
Is it live?
Well, the green light's on now. I don't know what that means, but
Yeah, he's, see if the screen is- We have volume and video.
Okay, we're ready to go.
We are?
I said, do we have volume with the video? Can you hear through?
I can, the mic's live.
I was hearing the audio feed on the,
You good?
Okay.
We're good.
okay. Okay, we're back in session. And we're back to street closure policy.
Lisa Hannon, zoning official. I'm back. So, again, we are looking for council direction on how you want us to incorporate this in either the event manual, in the event application process, if we need to take a like a market-based approach where the rental fee structure will help maybe not eliminate, but limit the number, because if you're charging somebody to use the street, they may not be asking every weekend to use the street. So, and we've got certain criteria if you want to add, delete, make more criteria, just as long as we can justify the criteria that we're asking for.
And if you're really looking for a differentiation between types of events that are permitted, then maybe David could address what constitutes more of a public event versus a private event that the public's able to access.
Gee, thanks, Greg.
You're welcome.
Well, I know how I feel about stuff, but I'd like to hear from you
Oh,
guys
well,
first.
first of all, I think a fee schedule that incorporates all these different events is appropriate, and it should be in place, because that that'll regulate it by itself. If they have to be reasonable fees, but not everybody will think, well, can I do it every week with the fee schedule? So that's an important thing to, I think, have in there, first of all. Now,
Anybody else?
I was given feedback by residents that would like to see us increase the amount of, that we would charge for profit and reduce the nonprofit, so that it's to discourage the businesses. That was kind of the sentiment. The only issue is, we have on the recent applications from Harbor Social have included a nonprofit twist. So it's what I don't want to see is that businesses then have a nonprofit.
As their
actually-
excuse for asking for a permit.
Well, not just their excuse, but actually have the nonprofit be the,
be the
for
event,
example,
yeah.
right now with the Department of Revenue, if an event wants to, I think it's alcohol, they want to have alcohol, they get a nonprofit to go apply for the alcohol permit.
Correct.
And so it's that kind of thing. And I don't want to see us put something in place that would encourage businesses to partner with nonprofits, so the nonprofit is then doing all the work and.
We actually, we do have something, it is in our event manual, when it is a joint event that is a for-profit and not-for-profit joint event, any rental fees right now in the parks go by the for-profit rate. Unless they are a 501c3, they don't get the, $100 a day in the park if they're a 501 501(c)(3)(6) or C6 or something, they will get a nonprofit rate. We have the nonprofit, for-profit, and then the 501(c)(3). So if it is a joint event, it goes by the for-profit rates.
Well, and there are a lot of businesses in town that have their own self-contained events that they're holding and doing things to benefit nonprofits all the time. And that's wonderful, raising funds for these nonprofits. So, anyway, I don't,
Jaha?
I just want us to be careful that we don't create more street closures from this rule we're doing right now. I can see this happening.
yeah.
Personally, go ahead.
My biggest concern is, and I would have liked to have seen it in capital letters, is disruption to the city. What Harbor Social tried to do was very disruptive to some of our businesses. And I think we've got to take a stronger stance against that sort of thing. We've got to be more proactively protective of our existing businesses. And I know that, we do not want to discourage in any way bands and events and keeping our downtown thriving, but we cannot do it on the backs of the little guys.
I would agree with that. I think, first of all, I don't want to be having these discussions once a month, every single month, because somebody's coming in for a permit to close the street. I think this is ridiculous, and it's a waste of our time, it's a waste of staff's time, and we've already made our statement about what we felt about it, and we're going to continue to have this happen. Until we set a policy and put it in place and enforce it, we're not going to stop this. So yes, I do think we should put a rental fee for closing the street in place. I think we should put a security deposit fee in place for closing the streets, and if the street is replaced back to the original condition at the end of the event, they get their security deposit back. I think that makes a lot of sense. We've already, I received a backhanded threat about the last permit request, that they would come back and ask for a non-profit permit to close the street the next time. And I don't appreciate a threat. I think that's inappropriate, it's unprofessional, and it borders on whether it's even unethical. And I would not support an event permit for that location just because of that. Because you don't threaten the city council that if you're not going to approve it for the for-profit business, that you're going to come back and have it be a not-for-profit event. That's not okay. And I agree with Debbie about, closing the streets to the disruption of other businesses. I think that's wrong. And, even in the event of the Sullivan Street Craft Fair, all the other businesses on that street can continue doing their business. And in fact, they thrive when the street fair is going on. So, and the same with the block party for that matter. All those businesses are open. So I do think we need to set a policy about what we're going to charge for a street closure. I think we need to set a limit on the number of times per year they can do it. And I really feel strongly about that, because I don't want to be going through this once a month. I just don't.
And I think that's, hence the issue. When you say how many times they can do it, how do you define they? And, one of the things that have been kicked around is who's the principal beneficiary of the closure? Is it the general public, or is the general public that can access a private entity?
Right.
So there has to be some fine line there of definition when you say how many times they can do it, of how do you define the farmer's market different than someone having a festival for a holiday or something, a private business, and that's where that definition of category comes in.
Well, and just to some extent, the farmer's market is grandfathered, because they've been doing that for how many years? And the Sullivan Street Craft Fair, the same, and the block party. But beyond that, I think any street closure, the business should apply for a permit and pay a deposit, a street closure policy.
Primary beneficiary of those is the general public, because you have multiple small vendors, but
Right.
the general public is the primary beneficiary using the city infrastructure.
Right.
When you are talking about private business that's sponsoring an event, the primary beneficiary, the general public can access it, but they're not the primary beneficiary.
And they have to go in and purchase food and beverage as a result of being on the premises for that event.
But you're still not protecting the small business people who are being put out of business.
Agreed.
by
It's not
Agreed.
entirely true. I mean, we do have parameters around, it can only be, you can only have this event on a weekend, let's say, when the other businesses aren't typically open. Now, just let me finish.
True.
And you can't block the traffic off. We're talking, in this example, very specific businesses there could be set-asides for them so that they don't feel like their business is being hampered. And and that's just I mean, we have to admit, we're just talking about sort of one situation here.
Yes, we are. It says, all right, so does everybody agree that we should charge a street rental permit, or a fee, rather? Does anybody have a problem with that? What's the magic number?
Yeah, well, I think we should let Lisa figure that out, but
Well,
the question, I heard Nancy say that somebody wanted to reduce that for not-for-profits. I think the city has to get back the money that they have to spend.
Absolutely.
So it shouldn't be lower than that number. And then, of course, the for-profit, if we end up doing that, can be higher.
are we
So-
going to have any not-for-profit businesses that want to do street closures?
Well, businesses, most likely not, but like the Punta Gorda Block Party's not-for-profit, the Punta Gorda Chamber with the Sullivan Street Arts and Crafts show is not-for-profit. So we revamped what we had before. We put the category 1, nonprofit, we were looking at $500 a day. Category 2 for-profit is $750 a day. Those are, again, we'll have to bring back a resolution for you to adopt any fees. A cleaning damage deposit of $1,000, and that would be for anybody, profit or not-for-profit. Any maintenance of traffic fee, we're gonna do actual cost. We're not gonna put any type of estimate. That's gonna be an actual cost that is invoiced by our Public Works Department, and that it would be due 2 weeks prior to the event, due and payable. Again, all city services such as police, fire, those are invoiced. Those are already in place in our event manual. Just the street rental. We can change the street rental fees how you see fit, raise it, lower it. Again, if it's a joint for-profit / not-for-profit, we go by the for-profit rate. We have that in our manual right now, and we can include that. Now, previously, when we had it in place, former councils exempted certain events from the street closure rental fees. The Sullivan Street Arts and Craft Fair, the parades, the 4 annual parades, the downtown tree lighting, the block party. At that time, the farmer's market was exempted, but now the farmer's market pays an annual rental fee, and they do their own maintenance of traffic. What staff had put out there was that all of those be exempted from street rental fees. However, if needed, maintenance of traffic and any city staff services, of course, would be paid by those entities. The Sullivan Street Arts and Craft Fair, they do pay for police services, because they direct traffic. So if you wanted some of the, as you would say, grandfathered in events who have been around, then we can exempt them from this specifically.
I'd be fine with that.
I would be fine, especially, I think, because they're so experienced at this. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, but I would imagine that they really don't, it doesn't take up a lot of staff time.
It's an annual permit. We usually do the chamber, we let them put in their 4 event permits at one time and send it through DRC. It's very simple. They work with police, fire with what they need. They work with Public Works for their maintenance of traffic needs. That one has been going on so long. I don't recall any issues. If they are, they're just tweaking of where signs are placed for pedestrian safety.
Well, now you're starting to define they, because most of those are primarily a public benefit.
Right.
Yes.
Debbie?
What would be the fallout from enforcing the 60 days ahead of time?
The fallout would be, we would probably have half the events that we have
Really?
permitted. Yes, ma'am. We've been very lenient on that. We strongly encourage it. We strongly encourage it every year. But we have the Peace River National Art Show. We probably got that event permit 30 days, maybe 40 days prior to their event. We would have had to say, no, you can't have it.
My
We-
concern is that there isn't enough time to, I mean, like some of these things that we do every year, I know that's different, but, you know, some of this, there's just not enough time to really fully vet the event and find out what the ramifications are gonna be.
So we put in that applications received 21 days or less prior to the event, we would not accept, or you could assess an additional late charge. There's some options that way we could do it.
But what concerns me about the example you just cited was they've been doing that event for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to not know, I mean, I remember when I was the event organizer for the Pedal and Play in Paradise, the first year when I was working with the city was like an experiment, but after that, it was, I knew what the drill was, and
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with COVID, and people were thinking at one point they weren't going to have the event because of COVID, and now that things are starting to open up a little bit more and people are being vaccinated, there's a lot more people coming forward at the 11th hour and saying, oh, guess what? And you know, Mariners just did this, my boat club. They just announced last week that they want to have the annual regatta, which is the first week of April. I mean, it usually is planned 8 months out, so.
And that is a good
That's fair.
point. That is a good point. They did, when we canceled all the events last year, their annual event is usually in March, so that was canceled, so they had one in December. They wanted to see how that went, kind of do their tallies and everything, so then they were like, okay, we're gonna have it again in March. So
Would
we
you
were a
tell,
little tight of time, but it was, again, it's an annual event. We don't have a lot of issues with it. It's in the it's in Lashley Park. We review it every year.
would you
So-
please tell them that they still have a sign over on Jones Loop Road?
Yeah.
Which one?
The Arts and Crafts Festival from Lashley, or Gilchrist
Yeah.
Park. Or was it Gilchrist or Lashley?
Which one, Arts and Craft Festival? Because the Peace River's coming up in a couple, 3 weeks.
Whatever was here in town a few weeks ago.
so it was
Then-
probably an arts, it's probably something that was on.
It's a blue and white sign, and every time I pass it, I think I should tell Lisa. 'cause
Okay. We'll,
yeah,
we'll have somebody go get that.
It's like across the street from where Aldi's is.
Okay.
It's on the right of way
Okay.
over there.
I would like to see first-time events have to do 60 days so that we have a chance to vet them.
Okay.
I'd agree with that.
I
Jaha?
don't, only because if there are events which, let's say they're dependent on a band or something,
I can't hear you.
if they're dependent on a band or something confirming, I don't want us to tie ourselves, we just make ourselves so we're not so event friendly. That's one thing that we live on, and I think there are situations where final confirmation may be within that window, say 45 days or so, where you may not know. And I mean, that's just part of the reality of planning events is you may not have a solidly planned event 60 days out.
But I understand final confirmation, but to start this whole discussion, they can go ahead and start this whole discussion.
Yeah.
And get all the balls rolling.
But if you really plan events, you may not actually file until you know you have your event ready. I just don't want us to tie, and that's reality. Like I have an event right now planned for May and one for July. We're gonna postpone July, we're gonna keep the May. It really is flexible, it depends on availability. This is reality, is that things have to be, I think we should have our strong, you need to, and there's penalties for being too close, but I think being too rigid harms us. I don't see it as being helpful.
I think 60 days is a goal. I think that we should strive for that whenever possible. And I would say anything less than 30 days, it's going to be iffy, because you guys have to do your job. You have a lot of work that has to go into an event permit.
Do you want
Especially
to,
new events.
Yeah.
do you want to assess a late application fee if they're 30 days or less? 60 days, you have a $50 application fee. If you turn it in 30 days before the event, it's a $75 application fee, because we do have to rush it through. We can make that part of our resolution with our fee structure that comes back to you.
I don't have a problem with that. Does anybody have a problem with that?
The reason that I'm uncomfortable with this is if you have it, you know, you take it before the commission that hears it on a Friday, and we are going to discuss it on Wednesday, we don't have the staff notes, we don't have the minutes over the weekend to study. That's when I do my prep. And, you know, that's what happened with Harbor Social.
Yeah.
And we were all hung out pretty much to dry because we didn't see this coming. And that's the only reason that I think, you know, there must be a reason that they asked for 60 days.
We were trying to make sure we could get things on DRC.
Yeah.
A lot of things don't have to come to council, but if we want the street closures, definitely. And we can say any event requiring
Street closure.
or requesting a street closure, 60 days. We
Yeah.
can make it a hard deadline for that type of
Okay.
event.
That I would be comfortable with, as long, you know, as long as there's time to get it before the DRC.
Okay.
That
But-
or council approval, because
Yeah.
I think what we're
Definitely.
talking about
Definitely
is,
council
you know,
approval.
like Jaha may be planning an event that doesn't require council approval, and if
Right.
so, I mean,
Yeah.
that is, but if it's council approval and we need all that information and there's a,
Yeah,
you know, there are dependencies.
Yeah.
And if we don't,
Okay.
can't have the dependencies, I think as Debbie said,
yeah.
Yeah, I think,
I definitely think council approval on a street closure, no question about it.
Okay, so any event that requires council approval, including street closures, must be submitted 60 days.
Yeah.
A hard
I would-
date.
I would appreciate that.
A
Yeah.
hard date. And you'll let staff be flexible on others if we can,
yes.
Yes.
as long
Yeah.
as we,
It's
okay,
like the Peace River,
right,
oh, that's not
right.
gonna require council, it's gonna be
No.
at
No.
Lashley Park and.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, are you still looking at limiting an entity for a number of requests per year? And
Yes.
how are we?
Yes,
How are we, is it so many closures per year per licensed business? Or because you have a lot of licensed businesses on Sullivan Street? I mean, staff needs to know how we need to move forward with creating a policy that we don't run afoul with.
Well, based on the disruption that Harbor Social causes when they close the street, if we say everybody's entitled to one a year, then we have to give them their one a year, right?
Yes, we would have to if they meet.
Even though they don't meet a lot of our other stipulations.
Well, okay, so they cause some disruption, but all those businesses were still accessible. You could access those businesses off of Retta onto Sullivan Street. They did not close the ingress egress for the Landsberg Bennett building. They didn't close the alleyway between their business and the Women's Club, and the Women's Club was still accessible. It may have caused somebody to have to do a detour, but they were not accessible. So I understand while the noise may have been a disruption or somebody might have had to do a detour, we do the same with the block party. Sullivan Street Arts and Craft Fair, it's not there's nothing except the Sunloft Center parking garage is the only thing that is open, that has to remain open when the Sullivan Street Arts and Craft Fair is on for any type of traffic. So, and I know that's a public benefit because it's out there for the public. That's where you get into the public benefit. So it's difficult for staff to determine, you know, when they come and say, we're only closing 90 feet of the street and we're leaving everything open and we're not asking anybody to close their business for that day, that it's that disruptive. It's hard for us to determine just because we don't like their noise or we don't like all the people there. I personally don't know how to make that distinction between the two. I guess I'm looking at it more of a logistical, on the technical side of it when it comes to those types of requests.
Well,
But there are
Mike-
still, oh, I'm sorry.
My concern, and I'll be very blunt about this, is I've tried twice to use the alley during business hours for Harbor Social. I have not been able to get through the alley. There have been trucks there and there have been people parked there. I think our women's club is one of the true gems in this city. And she's not in very good shape right now, and it would not take a lot for her to burn to the ground. And I am really worried that a fire contingency trying to get in there to put out a fire would be severely hampered by Sullivan Street being that closed. I mean, Sullivan Street Market, you can still drive if you had to. You could still get an ambulance through there. You could not, with a band set up in the middle of this, you couldn't put a fire truck through there. And I guess I'm thinking worst-case scenario of one of our treasures of our city. I think we're putting it at a tremendous risk. And honestly, they would have to back up the fire truck to get it out of there because there's no way you could get a fire truck through that alley the way people park. And when there's a big event there, I'm sorry, but the alley is blocked.
Even if they had to come from, by way of the event center, they wouldn't be able to get down Sullivan Street because people park on both
Right,
sides.
Right, and that's really my concern.
Okay.
I'm not picking on Harbor Social, but, I think we're throwing one of our most treasured assets under the bus with this one, and that's my concern. And I know there's nothing that you can do in an ordinance about that, but I want it out there.
So,
Just on that subject, these requests have to go through your committees, and they do have the police there and the fire people there, and they are comfortable with what,
They sign off on them
okay,
before we
so
were to
they're
move it
thinking that
forward.
they can get through.
That would be my determination by saying
I'm
that
not saying
it's
that
not,
someone's not parking there, but we can stop that probably.
yes.
There needs to be more scrutiny, is what
Yeah.
you're saying.
well, and we could even make it a part of our requirement that even though, and I respect Jen Molinar, our fire marshal, does a fabulous job. Even though the DRC may say, yes, but that day, what happens is people do go park, is I think what Debbie is saying. So we could state that all
Be
that
no
has to
parking.
be restricted. It's a restricted zone around these, and that you can't allow anything.
Correct.
And then what happens to the people who want to go to the women's club? They can't park there?
Well, they can't
I
park there,
guess,
so that
yeah.
it leaves, nobody can park there.
Okay.
We could do that no parking only on one side of the street. I mean, it's just,
During an event or something.
during that
Okay.
event, we could come up with some requirements that are very strict.
That's reasonable, yeah, because there has to be at least that open part in the back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you
Yeah.
park like this, there still needs to be a pathway.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so that it's just part of what comes with,
Just one of my concerns.
Yeah,
and it could happen anywhere in
Oh, I know that.
around the city.
somebody could set a fire in the dumpster behind the Landsberg Bennett building too, and they would have a hard time getting there with a fire truck.
And aside from that issue specifically, which is a good issue to address, what would the number be?
Uno.
Oh, the dollar sign?
No, the number of
Per year?
closures.
Oh, yeah,
per-
one.
Oh,
I mean, that's sort of what we're getting to
Well, we already
here.
said back in December, we
Yeah.
said pick one.
yep, I think
And
that's
we were
it.
very clear about that on a for-profit business that wanted to close the street.
I agree.
I see Lisa's kind of frowning on that.
No, I'm just trying to be consistent with what we allow now. So if you want to say that if it's a for-profit business at that location, per licensed business, pulling an event permit, then they're allowed one per year.
Now, would this include alleys? Because I know of one business that depends on 2 a year for the alley closure.
If it's a street or a public right-of-way, we
Are you
would have
talking
to
about
do
the,
that.
Sandra's
Sandra's.
needs 2 a year.
Well, she does the alley, though, that's not.
But
we-
that is still, it is open to the public. It's a public
But you
right of
don't,
way.
you've never brought it before council.
I never have because it's never been an issue. We've never
Oh.
had an issue with that particular request.
Okay.
Can we distinguish between a street and an alley? David?
You could, I mean, we had a recent discussion unrelated to street closures with respect to the legal distinction between an alley and a street. And so I think that you could distinguish between a closing of a street versus closing of an alley.
Okay.
And would we still charge them to close the alley?
Do we charge them now?
We do not. They just pay for any type of police service that is required or Public Works if they use maintenance of traffic services.
I don't personally have a problem with that one, but again, we can't be selective of which ones we approve and which ones we don't. So
Right.
I guess we have to be consistent across the board. If we're closing a street or an alleyway, they should have to be subject to the same rules as everybody else.
Well, except there is a big difference between a street.
Right, but but she's, now the question is
Okay.
that she does it twice a year.
Okay.
I guess I would like to then see what does it what does this cause staff in the way of any kind of cost to the city to do that, so that it may be a minimal cost to the business when it's an alley versus a city street that people actually go down all the time. I mean, not that I haven't driven down that alley, I have, but on a rare occasion.
Yeah, very rare for me.
So it's
Okay.
not like Sullivan Street that I use frequently.
Okay.
So,
So we're basically differentiating public infrastructure that has a primary public benefit that you're exempting with the ones that you listed versus non-public, as far as owned by the city, infrastructure that public can access, but is not primarily the benefit of the public, it's the benefit of the non-public entity, which you're not exempting, and you're using a subcategory of alley versus street to determine the number of closures and potentially the cost for the non-public.
yes.
Yes, what he said.
Yeah.
And just trying to figure out a structure of the,
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, we're giving Lisa direction, so she can go
Right.
and draft what has to be
Logic.
drafted.
She has to go like,
I think, okay, so we all agree we want to charge a street rental
Yes.
fee, and it's only one time a year for public streets. We also want to put a security deposit down that's refundable if they return the street to its original condition without damage. John?
Well, finish what you're saying, but
And for the most part, it's going to fall back on for-profit businesses that will have to pay this, because if they say that they're having an event for the benefit of a nonprofit, the for-profit pays the for-profit application fees
Yes.
and deposits. Okay.
okay, I don't have any trouble with that, except I think we're being very restrictive with only one event per a commercial business per year. I think that's really tight. I mean, we are a city that's trying to grow and do more things, and I think we got to allow more than one event a year.
I don't at all. We don't have that many
haven't had-
requests for street closures, really.
This is the first one since I've been on council.
Besides the annual ones like the block party
Yeah.
and stuff, and again, Leroy's did it, they did it 5 times in 5 years or 5 times in 4 years, so they may have done it twice one year, beginning and end of season.
I think one is appropriate.
I do too. I'd also like to see a requirement that the businesses on the street be given more than just the morning of city council notice.
Yeah.
Understood. We've got a list of criteria that we're gonna try to incorporate with this, so
Okay.
that will be one of them.
That's one that I think needs to be handled. And did you put in about 60 days?
Oh, no,
Permitting
it's 60
or
60
just a
days.
street closure?
We're going to strive for 60
Yes.
days application fee for special
So
events.
there you go.
All right.
Okay.
alleys would be, how would that be differentiated?
We only have one business that does that, right, that I know of? I don't think there's
Right
a,
now, but if you put it in there, there might be more.
yeah.
We need to.
Well, the Women's Club could come in and want to use the alleyway behind Harbor Social and have an event.
They could. I mean, that's why I'm trying to define it, so that we don't have to bring these back to council.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
501c3.
I would definitely have a sub-classification.
Yeah.
Okay,
for
we'll
alleys.
figure something out.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
Good
Lisa,
job.
do you,
Anything
Mayor,
yep.
have we decided if, who may request a street closing?
Well, it's going to fall on the business that, where the location of the event's going to take place, right?
Even if they are, yes. And so if that business is adjacent to that right-of-way that they're requesting to close, even if they're doing it in concert with a nonprofit, it goes toward that business.
Right.
So,
It would be charged toward, event would be charged toward that business, and it would be at the for-profit rate.
So your question is really, like, the business has to be adjacent to the street that's being closed? Is that what you're
that's-
getting
that's-
at?
That's what I'm getting at.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say that, I would agree with that.
So then Landsberg Bennett could ask us to close the
They could,
street
yes.
on behalf of a band who's just going to happen to be playing.
They
Okay.
But
Okay.
don't we have other street closures that are currently, that are affiliated with a business located on that street?
The block party, Sullivan Street Arts and Craft Fair.
That's.
But those are
But those are
Right,
exempt.
those are
We've already
exempt,
said
but
those are
Right now,
exempt.
we don't, because if Leroy's came in, they would be shutting the street adjacent to them on Sullivan Street. Right now, we haven't had any others. I
Sullivan
don't-
Street Craft Fair is actually hosted by the Punta Gorda Chamber
Chamber,
of
which
Commerce,
is-
which does abut
Right, their
Sullivan Street.
offices
Yeah.
are. That
Okay,
is
so
true.
suppose some other craft fair wanted to close Sullivan Street, and didn't have the tie-in with Chamber or one of the businesses.
I'd say no.
We'd say no.
Say no.
Okay, I just wanted that to be
No,
very clear.
There's way too many venues they could use that are off-street event locations.
That suits me fine, I wasn't trying to argue the point, but I
Yep.
just wanted to make sure staff was clear as to what the direction was.
I think we want to really discourage street closures as much as possible. It's the same thing with the Harbor Walk, by the way, when we have a Lashley Park event. I mean, we had a very strict policy for the longest time that we wouldn't allow the closure of the Harbor Walk while an event was going on in Lashley Park. And then we started getting all these requests, and every event that was going there said, oh, well, we have to have the sidewalk closed. Well, we then revised our statements to say when we have an event that has a band and security and all kinds of other things, they have to fence the area in, then we may consider allowing them to close the Harbor Walk. But they have to come up with an alternative path for people to take that won't be able to use the Harbor Walk during that event. So, you know, there are rules that we have to kind of be consistent about, and I think this is one of them.
And that's the same if a business there wanted to close an alley that was not adjacent to them. That's the same.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay, thank
So
you.
they have to be
okay,
adjacent.
thank you, Lisa.
We
Okay.
want to make sure we get the ambiguity out of it, so it doesn't have to come back here each
Yes.
time.
Yeah,
That's-
okay, utility pole removal.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
For the record, my name is Rick Keeney, Director of Public Works. If I can just give a little summary of the power poles that I believe we're going to be discussing this afternoon. In about July of 2019, Florida Power and Light started a hardening project, and what that mainly is for is to put in new poles, new hardware to help the poles withstand hurricane events. So they began that again in June and July. And I know originally this started out, I went through some emails and I know Mayor Matthews, Councilperson Praffke, I know this started out as when they put the poles in, they weren't taking the dirt away from the poles.
It actually started in January of 2015.
Okay.
Oh.
Well,
Seriously, it did. It started in January of 2015 when FPL started the hardening project in Burnt Star Isles. And then they stopped it in order for us to have our discussion and our vote on whether we were going to go underground or not. And now they have resumed it.
Okay.
So they did resume it in 2020, but it actually started, it may have been the end of 2014 when they actually started. Because I remember when I had pneumonia, going out, my husband had me go out and sit outside on our pool deck and watch across the canal where there were vacant lots, and I could watch them actually replacing the poles. So I
Well,
remember that.
For the phase I'm talking about today, it goes back to June or
19,
July,
yeah.
so 2020.
2019.
So, anyway, so we had, again, I know some council people were involved with it at a time. I know the city manager, Howard Koenig, at the time was involved, Mikhail Finkel, the then city engineer, Mark Gearing, myself. We had written, I believe Joan LeBeau also, we'd written letters and communicated with FP&L. And today where we're at is FP&L puts in the new pole, and then they notify Comcast and the phone company. Well, I'm going to speak in generality of Punta Corrals because I think this is mostly where the problem is that we're discussing today. Most of the phone is underground, and Comcast, I asked them to please give me a number of, they call them abandoned poles, that they were notified by FP&L to go and remove their hardware. So he gave me a number of, they have completed 119 poles that Comcast has, they call them abandoned poles, of 123 that they're aware of. So Comcast has taken most of their hardware off of the poles that they're aware of. And again, I'm talking about the Punta Corrals area in general for this discussion. So Comcast has notified FP&L of these poles being abandoned. And I did a quick count the other day. It wasn't precise, but it was over 100 poles that were abandoned that in my opinion, could be removed. So again, we've communicated the poles need to start coming out from FP&L, and we really haven't gotten a response where they have started doing that. So
And the
that,
other 4 out of the 123, the other 4 FPL had issues they had to resolve before Comcast.
yes, there are some,
Transfer their infrastructure.
there are some FP&L, those poles, the difference of the 119 to the 123. I do know during my tour, I did see there were still some transformers on some poles with jumper wires, if you will, over to the new poles. But the vast majority are abandoned and could be pulled. So that's what I have to report today. I believe this is what the agenda item was about, and I answer any other questions if you have them.
Well, thank you, and I know you went on a tour with the utility folks a few months back and went all around the city and made a list of all the locations that needed to be fixed,
Yes,
so to
we
speak.
did.
And I know I speak at least for myself, I have had no less than 75 or 80 emails, phone calls, in-person discussions with people that are just livid over the fact that all these poles are still sitting out there. Properties have not been returned to their original condition. My property is one of them, by the way. It took me well over a year to have them come out and take the redundant pole out. And first of all, it took forever to get Comcast to even answer a phone call. And then when Comcast finally did come, they moved the wires to the new pole, and then all these wires were hanging in the breeze, which still is occurring. There's all these orange and gray and black wires that are flapping in the breeze, and a good hurricane coming through is going to totally take somebody out of commission and no way to contact the planet Earth, because if they have all 3 services from Comcast especially, all that wiring is going to just go flying in the breeze. Anyway, the properties, even on my street, which were done well over a year ago, almost 2 years at this point, they're still not right. And I've communicated with FP&L a number of times, as recently as 2 weeks ago, because they also came through, they chopped down a bunch of trees that they thought were going to be in their way. They wanted to take one of my trees down, which was 18 feet into my yard off the street, and my husband refused to let them take the tree down. So what did they do? They came and they shaved it straight up and down, and they destroyed the front half of the tree. I'm surprised the tree actually lived, but they did that all over the place, and they left tree stumps all over the place. There's a whole bunch of properties that have tree stumps. Not only do we have now hanging wires, we've got duplicate poles, and some of which are leaning. It's a very dangerous and very unsightly mess, and I'm very upset with the way that they have not followed through. And short of making a threat to them, I don't know what else we can do, but maybe try to send a letter on behalf of everybody from the council and the city of Punta Gorda, and getting a little more assertive about asking them to get this done. Finish one section before you move on to another. I think this is ridiculous that it's going on this long. Does anybody have a problem if we draft a letter to the utility companies?
No.
I mean,
I
it's
would
gonna
copy
get
the
worse.
Public Utilities Commission in Florida. They hate it.
Yeah.
The utilities, any utility company despises the Public Utilities Commission getting anything negative, because they have to go to them to request rate increases. And I know, because I used to work for a utility, and before I worked for the utility, I had a problem, and I wrote to the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio over the issue I had, and within days, I got an answer from the utility. And I had a situation pop up later with my elderly mother, and again, wrote the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio in regard to her, and boom, I got a response from them. So I think that it would be advisable that we have this problem. I know from experience, when they did start the hardening project in Burnt Store Isles, that we experienced the same situation, that the duplicate poles sat there for months, and residents emailed me and commented, when are they going to remove this? It took forever for the Comcast to transfer the service, and again, I don't think they ever totally finished it like what you were saying, Lynn. And then it took forever for whoever FPL had come and remove the second pole. It took forever for that to happen. So it seems like this, as a project management exercise, that it's just not being very well managed.
Well, in the beginning, they didn't even call Comcast to tell Comcast they had to come and move their wires. I was in a meeting about the Burnt Store underground wiring, and they had already started the project in the bird section in PGI, and Comcast knew nothing about the hardening projects. They had absolutely no knowledge that they had to come through and move their wires, and they were like, oh, we do? Nobody told us that. So there's been a total lack of communication. I never received the letter to the resident that we were supposed to receive to notify us they were going to do that in our front yard to begin with. I wrote to Charlotte Miller about that at FP&L, and she was like, oh, well, they're going to send you one. I never got it.
Well, but what they did in Burnt Store Isles, they sent a letter to all the residents who lived on the streets where the poles were going to be changed, and they just said, we are going to be hardening our system within, and that's all they said. They did not say what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so it was a surprise to the residents when all of a sudden they ended up with second poles, and, I mean, so it was, I don't know if I would call it, they just didn't describe it very well. I'll put it that way. I'll be polite and say they did not accurately describe what was going to occur.
It's going to continue getting worse because they are now working in Burnt Store Isles again.
They are,
Now that the
right.
underground wiring's not going to happen.
Well, and it compounds the situation, because when they transfer the wires from the Comcast to the new pole, as you described, they're not actually finishing the job of, and that is compounded by the fact that when residents themselves want service, they're not finishing the job. So we have tons of these hanging poles, or hanging wires, cables all over the place. And in BSI, as you're aware, that there's been a volunteer that's gone and documented all of this, and we're still having problems getting that resolved, so.
Well, I asked
I
for
would
this to
say
be
go
on the
for
agenda. Okay, so that we'll write a letter to the utility companies on behalf of the city council and the city of Punta Gorda residents, and ask for more immediate action to be taken to follow through and get this project done in the places that have already been hardened. And maybe if that doesn't get any activity happening, then we write to the Utilities Commission. Gotta give these guys one more shot, because I'm kind of blue in the face talking about it with people, and I have addressed more citizen complaints about this than a lot of things that we've ever had on our agendas.
What's your hesitation to just send it to the Utilities Commission? I think I
You think we should start with them?
No, I think what you do is you send it to them, but the
Copy of the utility, we can do
Because in
that.
my situation, I had a problem when my mother was, this is back when people were, they had all these long-distance services, and there were people that were getting seniors to sign up for things, and so I wrote the letters directly to these companies to see if I could get action, but I copied the Public Utilities Commission, and the Public Utilities Commission, they jumped on it and went right to those companies. And one of them ended up on a FCC docket for a couple years,
Okay, we'll do it.
so.
Go for it.
Okay, good. Thank you, Rick. All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Recommendation from city officer, city manager.
I have nothing at this point other than to say thank you for helping us move these projects forward and get some of these things off our plate so that we can focus on other things as we continue to make progress. So thank you very much.
City attorney,
Nothing further, thank you.
city clerk.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Karen Smith, City Clerk for the record. Performance objectives.
Anybody have any comments about the performance objectives?
Just looking for your approval for those.
I
Had some
am very
discussions.
happy to see it done in this format now. We've been talking about this for all the years I've been on council. This is an easily trackable, monitorable way of going about getting things done every year. And it's not just, oh, we're going to upgrade our computer system. It's, this is more defined, and it gives you trackable goals that you can attain, and it will help us a lot when it comes to the time of the year when we have to do an annual review. I think this is something that will help all of us, and I've also asked Karen if she would produce the action register for the clerk's office like we're getting from the other parts of the city and from the city attorney, because I think that will help us on an ongoing basis to know a little bit more about what's going on internally in the department. So I'm very happy with what I see. Okay, so anybody have any other comments? Okay, so we need an approval, motion for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the city clerk performance objectives for 2021. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Good job.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the input that I received from each of you, and which resulted in this list, and I think it's going to be very helpful for us to, not only to prioritize our projects, but to get them accomplished in a time frame. And I think we have a challenging year ahead with the move and everything else, so this, thank you. Okay, moving on to boards and committees then. Under vacancies, Board of Zoning Appeals, we have 2 vacancies for alternates. The Burnstone Isles Canal Advisory Committee, we have 1 unexpired term. The Building Board, we have 1 vacancy for an alternate. Historic Preservation Advisory Board, we now have another regular seat and 2 alternates on that board. Utility Advisory Board, we have 1 unexpired term. General Employees Pension Board, an unexpired term. Firefighters Pension Board, 1 2-year term. Donation Review Committee, we have a vacancy for a representative of a local nonprofit concerned with the history of Punta Gorda. And then we also have under nominations, we have a 3-year term on the Utility Advisory Board. We do have 1 eligible applicant, Mr. Dennis Cafaro. So if you would like to nominate and reappoint him, I just need a motion for that.
Nominate and appoint.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to nominate and reappoint Mr. Dennis Cafaro for the Utility Advisory Board. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, under policy and legislation, I don't have a whole lot to talk about this week. The legislature went into session on Tuesday this week, and so we're looking forward to hearing some good things. Hopefully, we'll not have a lot of bad things happen in this legislative session, but stay tuned, there's more to come. I think one of the biggest things that we're looking at is the short-term rentals that's forever plagues all of us. So that's going to be a very big item on their agenda this year. And we're hoping that our bill will go forward and into the Senate and maybe come through and help us fund the Boca Grande project. So keep your fingers crossed. That's all I have. Jaha?
Yes, I'm gonna open one thing. One quick thing. This is one of the things that's come up during session. This year, there are two legislators in Orlando that want to make the Emancipation Day holiday of Texas the date for Florida. And so all the cities are actually just writing letters of support to support the Senate not going forward with this. In Florida, May 20th is the day of emancipation. This is when it was done. In Texas, there's a holiday called Juneteenth, which is Texas only. It's not even a national holiday because they're actually, the dates were after that for Kentucky and Maryland. It's basically just they're asking us, the Florida Black Caucus of elected officials already supported this. Cities of the Tallahassee, Lakeland, Fort Myers, everyone's supporting this, that we simply just want to have a Florida correct holiday because the state is looking at making a holiday and two legislators are saying we should take Texas as holiday rather than Florida. So I just wanted us to be able to just write a letter of support of being historically correct. And in regard to Punta Gorda, from the very beginning, from the first decade of the 1900s, we actually used to have parades here for that day. So it's just to be consistent with the history. It's just asking for that.
Fort Myers has done a resolution regarding that for the.
Okay,
I recommend we do the same.
sure, yep.
Definitely.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay, Nancy?
So Jaha and I went to the Tourist Development Council meeting on the 12th, and was not a very long meeting, but it was giving us reports that the tourism in Charlotte County is doing well, relatively speaking, compared to what's around us. We kind of seem to be this island. And so we are blessed that people are coming here because they feel safe. We're not a metropolitan city. Things are outside, so people are coming here and to Charlotte County. And so we are really doing well. And just an example, the Pickleplex in the month of January and beginning of February, so it was really just in a short period of time, created over $2 million in economic impact for Charlotte County, just for the two tournaments that they had. So it was significant. And that actually they were the ones who actually generated all of the Tourist Development Council's economic impact for the months of January and February. That was really what was discussed. And they did discuss short-term rental, and it's conflicting for Jaha and I because there are a number of people on the Tourist Development Council who are really much.
Short-term rental people.
They're short-term rental people, and so they like the more short-term rentals, the better, because that's what they do. And so I had to say that and they wanted to have the Tourist Development Council provide support legislatively, and I said, well, it's a problem for Jaha and I, because we're on the other side of that coin, so we had to, and we said why, so, and.
So hence we did not.
We did not support it, so, but it was a good meeting. So.
Good, thank you. Debbie?
Well, I didn't go to the Punta Gorda Public Housing meeting because the Attorney General of the state was in town to congratulate our police department, and I opted to go to that. And I think my one takeaway from it was that she was surprised that there was anybody there from city council. So I wonder what the rest of the cities are doing when she shows up. But it was really nice to see and gratifying to see our police department get kudos for something that was initiated by our officers themselves. And the fact that she took her time out of her schedule to honor them was really very, very nice.
John?
Unfortunately, I had to miss a meeting or two this last week or two, but you're all aware of what transpired at the airport authority, and that's a good thing. They put off any decisions on this till who knows when, probably never. So it was an interesting thing to follow, though.
Indeed it was.
Yes, it was.
A couple of very interesting Zoom meetings that week. Okay, if there's no further business, we are adjourned.
Before before 1 o'clock.
A minute. I was hoping for 12, but, oh well.
12:30.
Yeah, 12:30 would have been good, too.